The Kings season has sadly come to a close in the play-in game for the 8 seed against the Pelicans. 0-6 against the Pelicans this season. Obviously, very disappointing that it had to end like this and that we couldn't make the playoffs. It was an extremely, tough Western Conference. It kind of hurts to really go out 2 seasons in a row with some injuries. Injuries happen to every team. There's no doubt. I just think, not quite a deep enough team to be able to deal with, like, last season injuries to Fox and Sabonis, this season injuries to Monk and Herter, especially when it's, two guys who had similar things being injured. So that's obviously unfortunate, but we still had a chance in this game. There's no doubt. And, the Pelicans have Zion out. So obviously, like I said, every team deals with injuries. But just, before I get into this game, taking a bit of a step back, looking at this King season, no doubt, like, I'm going to make separate episodes to recap the King season. But just, with the King season coming to a close, I have to talk a little bit about it. First of all, I had fun watching this team this season. I had fun doing this podcast. Thank you guys for the support, watching, the nice comments. When I started this, 2 years ago, didn't think it'd be the case that it would actually have anybody listening or watching. So thank you guys for that. I had a fun time. And I think when you just look at this Kings season, the Kings, some people and, many of us Kings fans might be a little frustrated with the ups and downs of this season. But, I think when you take a step back, the Kings went 46-36 in the regular season. That's pretty good compared to, what the Kings usually are. One of the rare winning seasons in Sacramento Kings history. The Western Conference is just, it's tough. And I think when you look at this team, they were hovering right around top 6 the entire season until those injuries hit late on in the season. I'm sure, we're going to be frustrated about some losses to the Hornets and the Blazers and teams like that. But when you look at it from a more objective view, we didn't lose to teams under 500 any more than other top teams do. And so I think really, when you look at it, this Kings team met expectations. And then when you take into account injuries, this is about what people would expect. I think we expected to be fighting for top 6 as a healthy team. When you take into injuries, we drop a little bit. That makes sense. A lot of people picked the Warriors against us. We were able to get past them. And then obviously this dang Pelicans team, man. 6-0 against us. That's crazy. I felt like this was the one, they can't go 6-0 against us. But they can. There are going to be some pretty, crazy, maybe irrational takes to this season, no doubt, coming in tonight and in the next few days. But I think we've seen a lot of growth in this team having to face adversity. I think it's hard to judge a team based off one season. I think it's a lot easier now that we have 2 seasons to look at. And that's something we have to remember. This is just the second season of this team really being together. I think with the injuries that we saw and with maybe the poor performance of some players, we saw other guys step up. We saw Keon Ellis, who it's like could be a starter for the future, or at least a rotation player. He was obviously a positive surprise. Davion got it going towards the end of the season. Great seasons from Fox and Sabonis. Growth, especially defensively, from Keegan Murray, but also offensively. Kevin Herter will be back next season, bar any trades. I expect him to be better than he was this season. I think Sasha Vezenkov's going to be better. Obviously, you're going to have some guys be better, some guys be worse. That's just the way it goes. But what I'm trying to say is I think there's a lot to build on. This team got much better defensively, struggled at times offensively. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks around Malik Monk. And if he goes, then, there definitely needs to be changes made to this team because we don't have a lot of shot creators. And that was a big problem with this game. But if he stays, then I think we got a good group and it doesn't require massive changes going forward. I think we have a solid core group. So getting into this game, it started off really well. The Kings weren't shooting well, but they were able to get inside. The Pelicans were able to exploit some cross matches in transition And, I thought Harrison Barnes got exploited a few times when he was cross-matched. And so did Keegan Murray against McCollum. And you had the Kings just not being able to hit a three or a mid-range jumper. And yet still, the Kings were able to get out to a lead. And so it was very positive signs. They were turning the Pelicans over. I think it was 1 turnover to 6 that the Kings were leading in. And that was a big reason they got off to a quick start. And Sabonis had 3 steals and a block and was pushing the pace. And he was getting inside, being aggressive against Valanciunas, scoring inside. He did pick up 2 fouls, one of them on a very weak moving screen call. So had to deal with a little bit of Sabonis foul trouble early on, but Fox had it going. HB got it going a little bit in the post when Sabonis went out, and the Kings had a 24-17 point lead. And that was all without really knocking down any threes. And I said coming into this, Kings have to knock down threes against this Pelicans team. It's as simple as that. And they didn't early on, and it was like, okay, maybe our defense is going to carry us through this. But then kind of as expected, things turned around because we weren't hitting our threes. And we needed the bench to come in and provide a spark from beyond the arc. And it just didn't happen. And maybe that's a little unfair to the bench, just because it's 2 guys off the bench that can hit threes. And that's Davion Mitchell, who before the second half of this season had been awful from 3 almost his entire career, and then Trey Lyles. So obviously the Kings being shallow at this point definitely hurt them a lot. The Pelicans just dominated the bench point battle. The Warriors did as well, but it was okay because you had Keegan Murray hitting from 3. You had, HB hitting, you had Keon Ellis. And so it was okay. But then Sabonis went out and the Kings offense struggled. The Kings offense just struggled when either Sabonis or Fox were out. When both of them were out there, that was the only time good things were going to happen. 4 straight turnovers to end the half to end the quarter with only a 2-point lead after going up 7. And then I think they turned it over to start the second quarter as well. So I think it was 5 straight turnovers. And the offense just looked awful. They just weren't able to hit threes. And against this long Pelicans team, I knew that was going to be the win condition. It was always going to be the win condition. They had to be able to knock down threes like they did against the Warriors. And they just didn't, because it's so hard to create anything inside, and you're going to turn the ball over against the like of the Pelicans, and the Kings don't have the shot creators. Like I mentioned earlier, they had to play one-on-one, and that's not the Kings' strength at all. For a lot of the game, they had more turnovers than assists. It was really, really bad. They had 15 turnovers on the game, only 21 assists, with I feel like a lot of those coming kind of in the late comeback attempt. Keegan was just struggling early, and he's kind of the guy who, with Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter out, he has to be the guy every single game. When defenses are keyed in on Sabonis and Fox, he has to be the guy that's going to be that secondary shot creator, and he just wasn't able to do that like he was against the Warriors. And that's just somewhere where he has to grow. It's the consistency. We've seen the highs with him, but we also see the lows. And so he just has to find ways to get more consistent going forward. And, I think that's very normal as a second-year player. The Kings coming into the season, the Kings wanted to rely more on Keegan offensively. But they definitely didn't want to have to rely this much on him late in the season. And they were forced to. And that's just kind of what we lived and died by. And we lived in the Warriors game, and we died here in the Pelicans game. The Kings offense was just Fox, Sabonis, Barnes. That was the entirety of the Kings offense. Keon Ellis didn't get anything going from 3 or inside. And then the problem was when the Kings didn't come out knocking down their threes, then the decisiveness went away. There was a little more hesitation on the 3-point shots. And that, when you're hesitating on those 3-point shots a little, the Pelicans are right on you with their length. And when they're not scared that you're going to shoot the ball, they're going to pack the paint. And even if you get by one guy, it's going to be really hard to find anyone with that length inside. And the Kings turned it over, and they couldn't finish inside. and it felt like everything was hesitant. Just once those early shots didn't go down, that really just closed down the paint as well. We had to rely on, Barnes going one-on-one. We had to rely on Sabonis going one-on-one. And that's not normally Sabonis's game, but he actually did pretty well. And he was barely keeping the Kings afloat to start that second quarter without Fox. So credit to him for that. He's scoring inside and creating, but Davion, he was firing away, and that was the right thing to do. Like, I have no problem with the shots that Davion was taking. He had to take those. No one else was hitting from deep. He has to come off the bench and provide a spark, where Malik Monk normally would, and he just didn't hit him, at least not in the first half. And the Kings were just had to work so hard to get anything offensively. And then there were a few times in that second quarter where they just didn't get back defensively in transition and gifted the Pelicans points, because the Pelicans weren't getting anything easy on offense either. And so giving up those moments in transition when the Kings are struggling, especially in moments where the Kings finally score, then to let the Pelicans just run it right back after makes, I mean, that just hurts a lot when you finally feel like, okay, you've extended the lead a little, or you've cut into the Pelicans' lead a little, and then they just run it right back. And that hurts a lot. Free throw shooting, big issue. 15 for 22. I think there was a span where the Kings missed 4 or 5 straight free throws. Fox ended up going 7 for 11 from the line. He started out 2 for 6. Surprisingly, Sabonis was the guy who went perfect from the line, 5 for 5. But the Kings missing free throws in a game where offense was hard to come by, missing open shots. And, I think when people talk about the Pelicans' length, like, I think it definitely does have some impact on three-point shooting, but I don't think it has as big of an impact as people kind of make it out to be. And I think more so what it has an impact on is the ability to drive into the paint and then easily find shooters on the perimeter. Or if you do get the threes and you're missing them, then that's when the length really becomes a problem, because they know you have to resort to other avenues of attacking the basket. And that's when the turnovers start, and that's when the Pelicans start getting out in transition. And the Kings started this game winning the transition battle in the, for most of the first quarter. And then the end of the first quarter and to the rest of the game, they pretty much lost the transition battle. It also felt like every time the Kings got a deflection, it would just somehow end up in the hands of Trey Murphy on the perimeter, and he would knock down a three. That was pretty disheartening. Just every time the Kings would, it felt like they were playing good defense. Lyles gets his hand on it, or Keon Ellis gets his hand on it, and it's like, oh, drops right to Trey Murphy on the perimeter, 3-ball. So that was rough. Harrison Barnes was really the only thing that saved the Kings offense in the middle of the second quarter. And the Kings started turning it over. You had that Keegan moment where he went down hard and hurt himself, but also, in the process of hurting himself, gave the ball to the Pelicans, and they got a dunk out of it. And then I don't even think the Kings were settling from three for most of the first half. They just weren't knocking him down. They were getting pretty solid looks. Even Mike Brown said it in his interview, I think after the first quarter, that the Kings were getting good looks. And they were, and they just weren't going down. But then towards the end of the second quarter, that's when the Kings started settling a bit. But Fox did hit 2 huge threes, and so that kept us in a bit. I was wondering, even before Keegan went down, if the Kings would go to Sasha Vezenkov, because no one could hit a shot. So, you need someone off the bench to provide something. And so then when Keegan went down, it became even more obvious. Okay, we need Sasha here. And he came in and rimmed out a 3. That was the moment. We really needed him to hit that. He didn't look very good defensively, at least not in the first half. He did run the floor, though, and get a layup, which was sorely needed, but it just felt like towards the end of that second quarter, the Pelicans smelled blood in the water, and they just started running circles around the Kings offensively. And somehow, the Kings were still in the game. They were within 9 at halftime, and so it felt like everything went really poorly, yet they were within 9. But I feel like the Kings had a chance. They had a chance, when they went up 7, or even, before they went up 7, they had their chances. They were playing really good defense. They got some good looks, and they just didn't capitalize on them. And I felt like we kind of had the same story against the Warriors, where, yes, we were hitting more threes to start against the Warriors, but there was a time in the second quarter where the Kings had an opportunity to capitalize. They got a bunch of stops. They could have been up much, much more. They weren't, and the Warriors came back into it, and it was only a 4-point game at halftime. And so I feel like it was similar in this game, the difference being the Kings hit even less threes. And so when the Pelicans make their run, instead of coming within 4, they extend a lead to 9. And that's just been the problem ever since Monk and Herter have gone out. That's been the problem the whole time, because the defense definitely was not the problem in this game as a whole. Although I do think there were definitely some times of some poor defense. Overall, it was not the problem. And just with the personnel that we have out there, just had to hit threes, and we didn't. But, I mean, to the Kings' credit, like, it felt like everything was going against them. And they came out, and they stayed in the game for a very long time. And they kept giving themselves chances. They started off the third quarter, they were getting some stops. I think they were within 8, and then they had a transition opportunity. Keon doesn't take the 3, tries to pass to HB in the corner, turns it over, leads to a corner 3 for the Pelicans. Kings come down again. Harrison Barnes gets blocked. Transition 3 for the Pelicans. Went up to 14. Again, it felt like it was over at that point. And even after that, the Kings kept fighting, and their offense got a little bit of rhythm in that third quarter. But then the defense let them down. There was a bunch of miscommunications defensively, giving up dunks on cuts. Time after time, it was easy looks at the basket due to miscommunications. And it was the offensive rebounding that was keeping us in it. Davion came in, hit 2 threes. Keegan also got a block into a Fox 3. So the Kings, they kept fighting back. And they got the offense going. But it was these constant moments of just falling asleep, it felt like, a little bit defensively. And the Pelicans, it was either times of falling asleep or miscommunications. And the Pels were getting open dunks. These weren't some amazing plays by the Pelicans that were getting guys open for dunks. Like, there were definitely times in the first half where the Pelicans exploited the Kings and were able to get into like pick and rolls with Larry Nance and get easy looks at the basket. Like, those, I get. You're going to allow some dunks there. But these were just like easy cuts to the rim that the Pelicans were getting some dunks on. And so when the Kings finally get it going offensively, again, it's like they couldn't get past that 7-point mark because they just couldn't get stops. And then they could have got even closer, and then they started missing free throws. Fox carried the offense, and he was really good in doing that, but then he missed his free throws. And then he ended the half really poorly. He didn't, go to the basket. He just dribbled on the wing, let the defense collapse on him, then just threw a pass right to Jose Alvarado, I think it was. And then he didn't play defense on Brandon Ingram. People saying it's a push off. Like, no, it's not. It's it's not the playoffs, but it's the postseason. Even in the regular season, like, they're not going to call that. That was just him, I think, being tired of having to carry the team. And, he plays hard defensively on almost every possession. That was just one of them where he just tried to draw an offensive foul to kind of not have to play defense, and it allowed Ingram to get an open jumper. I think he was just tired. The Kings continued to play Sasha Vezenkov a little bit in the second half because they're just looking for anything. Trey Lyles had a poor game. Like, when he would get an open look, he steps out of bounds. He just couldn't get anything going offensively. Keon Ellis, a really poor game, and so you have Sasha taking some of those minutes. Davion played a lot of the minutes that Keon Ellis was playing in the second half because he did get us back into it. And so again, it felt like the Kings were not playing well, and here they are still within 9. They lost a little bit of ground without Fox to start the fourth quarter to go to 11, but then they had their opportunities inside, and they just kept getting blocked or getting stripped, wouldn't go up strong into the body of the Pelicans players. And when you're not hitting around the rim, the other team's going to run it right back the other way and get a pretty good look. And that's what happened. Pelicans just went on a big run. Jose Alvarado was pretty key for them. Always hate playing against that dude. And Fox just kind of resorted to chucking from three, which I mean, I don't blame him. They had to just get some kind of miraculous 3-point shots if they wanted to come back into this game late. And they did started to come back a little bit. But it was too little too late. A valiant effort from Fox, forcing 2 turnovers and trying to make a last minute comeback. They didn't give up, but just wasn't enough. The Kings also, they went smaller in the second half. No Alex Len, and also just playing the starters big minutes, obviously. I think Mike Brown just felt like he needed to leave as many shooters out there as possible because it's like someone needs to hit. And I see Kings fans who are frustrated with the lack of points in the paint or just relying on the 3 ball. Like if the Kings just tried to go to the paint every time and didn't shoot threes, it might look even worse than this. It probably would look even worse than this. With the way these two teams match up and the way the Kings play, then the personnel they have, they had to hit threes. That's just the way it is. And they went 11 for 41 from three, and the Pelicans went 7 for 19. Kings won the possession battle by 3 possessions. They had 3 more offensive rebounds, even on turnovers. And so that's always a talking point of Mike Brown's. So they did that. But I just think, obviously, shooting. They just needed to shoot better. But also, I think they needed to win the turnover battle, to win the transition battle. And that was always going to be key. And so, yes, they did, win the possession game a little bit. But I think they needed to win it by quite a bit more, especially in terms of turnovers. The Pelicans just made us beat them one-on-one. And at times, Fox, Sabonis, and Barnes did. But, you look at the roster, and those are the 3 guys that are going to beat you one-on-one. And nobody else really is going to beat you one-on-one. Davion might occasionally, but no one else is really going to take it upon themselves to go one-on-one. They were up in Keegan, trying to make him uncomfortable on the ball, and that was pretty successful. After he missed some shots early on, then he couldn't get himself going off the dribble because the Pelicans just wouldn't let him. And he's not a good enough off the dribble player, at least yet in his career, if ever, to be able to do that. And you just look at the battle of the bench. You have Larry Nance, Najee Marshall, and Jose Alvarado, the 3 guys off of the Pelicans bench, all playing 20 plus minutes, all in double figures. You look at the Kings bench, and you have Davion at 20 plus minutes, no one else over 13. Davion had 10 points, the rest of the bench 2 points combined. Keon Ellis also in the starting lineup with 0 points. Obviously a tough game for Keon after coming off of maybe his best career game against the Warriors in terms of both offense and defense, combined. And the Kings were able to limit CJ McCollum. And if you told me they were able to limit CJ McCollum coming into this game, I would think they would have a pretty good chance to win. And in reality, that's the reason it was even close, is they were able to perform defensively and limit CJ. But when you only score 98 points, it's going to be really tough to beat anyone. And so it's unfortunate because, I don't think the Kings would have won against the Thunder in the first round. The Thunder are a great team. But I do think the Kings could have put up a little bit of a fight. And who knows, maybe, Malik Monk would have returned at some point. And so, obviously, that would have been really fun to see. But not to be, and this is where the Kings season end. It also means the Kings retain their pick. I believe it's going to be the 13th overall pick because the pick with Atlanta was protected. And so that should be interesting what they do with the pick. I mean, last time we were picking around this area, we picked Tyrese Halliburton. So you never know. Maybe we could get someone really good if we make the pick or you trade the pick. People saying this is a weak draft class. Definitely weak at the top, but that doesn't mean you can't find good players. especially in the first round or in the lottery. And so it'll be interesting. Also, uh, I don't see it as that big of a catastrophe that the Kings still owe a pick to Atlanta. Yes, it does make things a little more complicated when it comes to trading future picks, but I think if the Kings want to do something and make a move that would require trading a bunch of picks, then they'll make it happen, and they can make it happen. And so it doesn't hurt to have a lottery pick at your disposal, no matter how good or bad the draft class is perceived to be. And obviously, like I said, I'll get into the Kings offseason in the future, and we got all summer to speculate about different things in regards to the Kings roster. But obviously, if the Kings can resign Malik Monk, they're in a great spot. If they can't, then they're in a much tougher spot. And that's really what it comes down to. And if they can't re-sign him, then, I mean, the emergence of Keon Ellis makes things a lot easier because it means Kevin Huerter maybe could take on more of a Malik Monk role. Definitely not the same player. And the Kings would have to add more ball handling and creation, especially off the bench, if not in the starting lineup. There's also Harrison Barnes and his spot in the starting lineup that the Kings, I'm sure, will look to find someone that they could get into the starting lineup. But I definitely don't think that it's a given that they'll find someone. And so he definitely could be back starting next season. I know that that will disappoint some people, but he was good in this game. I mean, 17 points. He did everything he could offensively to try to help this team. And I do think he grew into the season a bit. Definitely not the Barnes of last season, but can still be valuable. And so it'll be really interesting to see what the Kings do this offseason. And so, anyways, for the last time, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. The last time this season, of course. I will be back at some point in the near future to recap the season. And so I will see you guys then. Peace.